welcome our guest, above all, and all you distinguished guests, to an interesting event. I also would like, above all, to thank President Nadia McConnell of the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation for co-sponsoring the event, as well as hosting it, including the sandwiches and coffee, etc. So without further ado, I'll turn over the proceedings to our moderator, Mr. Jurij Dobczansky, who will take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Boris. My name is Jurij Dobczansky. I'm a senior cataloger at the Library of Congress and a member of the local branch of the Shevchenko Scientific Society here in Washington. It's a pleasure to welcome Tetiana Stawnychy. She's a native of the Washington, D.C. area, Silver Spring to be exact. She obtained a BA in economics at the University of Chicago in 1989 and a master's in theology from the International Theological Institute in Austria. This was in 2006. From 92 to 93, she was a staff member of the Project for Economic Reform in Ukraine, where she co-edited the newsletter Privatization in Ukraine. Between the years 1995 and 2001, she had a number of jobs, among them for the Archdiocese of Washington, the Roman Catholic Church. This was in church administration. It was administering youth programs. At the State Department, she worked for 2 years as an interpreter for the Office of Language Services. This was for visiting Ukrainian delegations. From the fall of 2001 until 2005, Tetiana helped set up the initial administrative operations for the Patriarchal Curia of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church in Lviv. She assisted with foreign visitors and dignitaries and with grant programs. From 2006 to the present time, together with Father Sviatoslav Shevchuk, currently the auxiliary bishop of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church in Argentina, she started the development office for the Patriarchal Curia, at that time in Kyiv. She was appointed director of the Patriarchal Curia Development Office in the fall of 2008. Ms. Stawnychy will address the role of the Church in rebuilding civil society in Ukraine. I'd like to welcome you all, and especially our guest, Tetiana Stawnychy.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to just thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Special thanks go to Enthesha, to TWIG, and to the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation. Let's do that. So today, what I'd like to do is invite you to look with me at an organization which is a part of the fabric of the developing civil society in Ukraine, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. And together with other religious denominations, it is an important component of Ukraine's growing civil society. So we're going to look and see how it has been developing, and consider its role and contribution in rebuilding society in Ukraine. And in order to do that, to set the stage, first I'm going to just take a minute and go over what it is that we mean by civil society. Then I will introduce very briefly, because I think most people are acquainted with the Church, but I will introduce the Church and just a very tiny bit of its most recent history for those who may not be acquainted with it. And later we'll move on to how the Church has been developing as an organization, and in that context we'll cover what I think is most interesting, which is specific examples of different programs and ministries and how they're affecting Ukrainian society. So, with that, we'll move on to the first slide. Okay. It's not working. Doesn't seem to be working. Well, there we go. Okay. Oops, I went ahead a little bit. Okay, so here's the first slide. So the question is, what is civil society? And the definitions that I found were civil society refers to the arena of uncoerced collective action around shared interests, purposes, and values. Another definition could be voluntary, civic, and social organizations and institutions that form the basis of a functioning society, as opposed to the force-backed structures of a state or the commercial institutions of a market. So what I'd like to focus on or point out here, I think what's important is this element of voluntary action, that it is a moment of taking initiative. And as I was reflecting on my talk today, I also thought about how important civil society is for the development of the Ukrainian state, because I think that taking initiative and this element of voluntary action is really what, in the end, will feed public service, and it will change public service to reflect the way that the government can work in a way that's very positive. So, that being said, we will move on to a brief introduction about the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. So, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, yes, I don't know if you're aware, it's the largest Eastern Rite church within the Universal Catholic Church. It is a church sui juris, which means that it has its own administration, but it is in full communion with the Bishop of Rome. And it is a carrier of the Eastern Rite Byzantine tradition from the time of the baptism of Rus in 988. And in that it has, because of its history and geographical location, it has a special calling to facilitate understanding between two Christian traditions, the Byzantine and the Latin tradition. Okay. And a picture of the church today, there are over 6 million faithful in the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church throughout the whole world. There are over 4 million in Ukraine and over 2 million in the diaspora. And as you see, we have already 29 eparchies and exarchates. Those are dioceses, organizational units of the church, and they're located in all of Europe, in the Americas, in North and South, and also in Australia. Okay. All right, and now just a few words about some historical background for Ukraine and the church. So I'm sure many of you are aware that historically Ukrainian society has a long tradition of civic activism. Civil organizations had particularly flourished in the second half of the 19th and the first half of the 20th century. Their development was brought to a complete halt during the Soviet period, as the organizations were destroyed and their leaders were persecuted. The church, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, was a leader in the creation of civic organizations. Many of you are aware of Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky, who was a big proponent of many both church organizations, but also societal organizations that were not related to the church. So what happened during the Soviet period? This is just very briefly, again, most of you are probably aware of this. In 1945, Metropolitan Slipi and the other hierarchs were arrested. In 1946 was held the Pseudo Synod. It was a synod that was held without bishops, with priests under threat of death, where they renounced the Union of Brest and forcibly reunited the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church with the Russian Orthodox Church. And at this point is when the church entered its underground period of existence, which lasted 43 years. Then we're going to jump very quickly to 1989, which was the year of the legalization of the church, and when Ukrainian Greek Catholic parishes received the right to register, and they became legalized. So, having looked at just very briefly at the history, it's important to consider what the realities were for the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church as an organization in 1989. The underground church was a strong church, but it was rather small. There were not that many people who participated in the church. But once the church came up out of the underground,